My name is Joe Bignall. I'm a principal recruiter at Interquest Group, and this is our podcast, People, Culture and Tech. This community group was set up 2 years ago in 2020 and has since hosted chats on mental health in the workplace, D&I, the role of recruitment agencies, and so much more. Our meetup group has over 1,000 active members, and the purpose of this is to connect with experts in their field so that hopefully us and our listeners can get just a little bit better. Today, we are talking about something that is not a new topic, but something that definitely should be on the forefront of many people's minds, women in tech. Before we meet the speakers, I'd like to encourage hiring managers, talent acquisition professionals, startup founders, and everyone in between to get in touch with Interquest Group concerning hiring demands. The group have launched a number of new initiatives that are bespoke solutions for every business problem. Whether that's a one-off niche engineer or you're scaling your engineering and sales team in excess of 10 to 50, believe me, we've seen it all. So get in touch and hear how the group can help and importantly, save you thousands on agency fees. Let's meet the speakers. So today we're actually joined by Monal, Elizabeth and Caterina. How you doing, guys?
Very well, thank you.
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good. So what I thought we'd do is start with brief introductions. No doubt you guys are definitely going to do it much more justice than I can. So if we go clockwise, Monal, would you like to just tell everyone who you are?
Yep, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm a director of engineering at Tray.io. Our company builds low-code automation software and helps the world's problem solvers to design their workflows through software integration, APIs, etc. My background has been in computer science all the way through. I've started as a full-stack engineer right after I studied in Columbia. I studied computer science, so I have a engineering background. I moved very quickly into front-end engineering, UI UX design early on in my career, which was with Morgan Stanley, where I spent over a decade. Very quickly then joined UBS, where both these places I was essentially looking after the digital operations platform. That is essentially a product ecosystem of all the middle and back office functions in the investment bank. Moving on from like being an architect to a manager of global cross-functional teams, it's been quite a journey, which led me to Tray. And here I am, it's just over 3 months now, and I'm joined by like a super community of what we call tradies over here. Very much familiar with the topic of women in technology and love talking about that. So looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Just before we move on, you've been at the business for 3 months now. Was women in tech or D&I, was that part of your interview process?
Yeah, I think that in terms of being inclusive and feeling like it was more of a conversation for how Tray, what are values at Tray that encourages fairness and equity across like their hiring process was just something that I felt throughout the process, and that goes to show how much value they put on it. And also, I was very excited by the fact that our SVP of engineering, Susan Lally, is also a female. So that obviously goes to show that they do value D&I, especially gender diversity in that sense. So it was really a pleasure meeting the team. And I found myself being very aligned to like how they want to run engineering there. So here I am.
Brilliant. Yeah, I was doing my research on the business earlier, and I actually found, I think it's like 70% of department heads are female or identify as women. So that was quite a high, in my experience, a very high number. So really fascinating. And we'll get into that more down the line as well. But thanks for the introduction, Monal. Next, clockwise, Caterina, lovely to meet you. Would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Hi, so I'm Caterina. These days, I am a consultant who specializes in digital transformation. My roots, however, are in pure technology. I started my career as a developer, predominantly in the front-end space, and a little bit of back-end, a bit of UX and UI design work in my early career as well. Back when I started and the market was less segmented, you would do both, and it was great to be able to see how changes in your design would impact code and code would impact design. And that's how I started. And then over the course of my career, I went up the ladder and took on roles like technical director roles or head of digital. And now I really enjoy doing digital transformation because it's my technology roots allow me to see how we can change the way that we work together, we do business with each other, and it's technology continues and will always be at the core of it. So in between the start and where I am now, I've done a lot of different disciplines as well. I've from strategy to innovation, and I've supplemented my journey from pure coding to those other disciplines through an MBA, which I finished in 2016, and from that came a dissertation, which I turned into a book on about new leadership models in digital innovation. And I suppose that's me in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Very interesting. And there's a few questions actually based on what you just talked about there as well. Sorry. Based on what you talked about where you worked your way through the ranks, and it'd be really interesting to hear your side of the story when you're going for promotion in big corporate companies. What was the scale of male to female that were going for that promotion? So yeah, we'll get into that, but thank you very much for that. Elizabeth, hello, welcome. Would you like to give an introduction of yourself?
Hi, of course. So I work at Tray along with Monal, and she's explained like what we do with automation, make the world move. Like, incredible company, obviously, having us. I am the release and infrastructure engineering manager at Tray. So I manage like 3 teams from SRE, system engineering, and SDET as well. My background's a bit different, I think. Definitely. I started actually working as a receptionist, and I studied business, and I then moved on to become a secretary and a PA. At the time, that's what they were called. I'm a bit older, so and now like PAEAs. And I found that I automated everything I did. So effectively, I didn't understand the continual manual tasks. So when an opportunity arose for me to move into IT and working with automation, etc., I took it, and that sort of just grew. So I started working at banks. RBS it was at the time, I think, the first bank I started with, and then worked through financial institutions. And I worked from a different perspective because I didn't have the technical training from the university, etc. My training was more on the job, and also I'm very structured and very structured in what I do. So therefore, I moved more towards the SRE release side of things. So making sure things go into production in a certain way, making sure the quality is good, that kind of side of things. I mean, it is technical because it's more about deployment. So it's more about how you put code together and how you deploy it, and so as people can utilize it. But it's different to from an engineering perspective. But I moved, as I say, I moved through banks, and then I started as release manager. I went to engineer. I did environment management. I did like building configuration, like source code configuration, etc. That kind of thing. And then I moved into managing teams and teams of like site reliability engineers, system engineers, site reliability engineers that are based on engineering as well as in the infrastructure side, and that's sort of how I evolved.
Yeah, so I think more kind of obviously on the release management and the release cycle side of things, so much more your brain works much more like a process driven way, so you see things clearly. So. Yeah, you know how to get from A to B to C, so the
I know how I
part.
want to get to A to B to C.
Yeah, you want to get there. Okay, cool. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, thank you very much for your introductions. Erin and Paula, would you like to just tell everybody listening who you are as well? Erin, I'll come to you first. Putting you on the spot.
Massively put me on the spot. My introduction is not going to be anywhere near as interesting. It's going to be very short, actually. So my name is Erin. I work for Interquest, a recruiter specialised in Java and Angular and anything really I can get my hands on at the moment. How long have I been here? Been here like 6 months. And so I'm kind of new to these podcasts, but I had the opportunity to work on them, and they said that I get to meet people like yourselves and get into some really good topics, and Women in Tech was happened just to be the first one we did. And yeah, just really wanted to get your answers on a few questions we've got for you. And that's about it, really.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'm Paula. I've been at Ecom for 16 years. I think I'm the longest standing employee of Ecom, and just been involved with the podcast last year with Paul, and they've been a huge success. So really interested to hear your answers, as Erin said, to the questions we've got today. And it's nice to meet you all. Thank you for joining us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Monal, I'll come straight to you and just jump straight in with a high level question. Why did you choose to get into tech?
That's a good question. I remember being interested in building things ever since I was a little child. I always was quite rebellious in the sense that I wanted to do what the boys could do as well, and they seemed to really like building things when I was younger. So it started from my first computer was black and white, old school. I had Windows 95 installed on it, and I started learning how to write HTML at a very early age. And my father really encouraged me to learn Microsoft Office at that time, because he said, this is the future and you need to learn how to do Excel. So those were my humble beginnings of getting interested in technology. And then, to be quite honest, I grew up in India, in Mumbai. So if you're academically good, engineering is typically considered a very good pathway into building a career. So it seemed to naturally fall into that. And that's when I got after 12th grade, after high school, I joined an engineering college, did my bachelor's in computer engineering. And then I was very much drawn to web development at that very time. And I started doing some advanced web development courses from there on, and I realized I wanted to do a master's as well in computer science. So it took me to New York, and that's when I did my master's in Columbia. Yeah, that was my journey into tech.
Brilliant. What was the ratio male to female when you was at university in India?
I think there were about less than 10%, I would say.
In your field?
In my field, yeah, in engineering itself. It's always been the case for me. I also joined the grad program where we were, and this is a metric that I like to use quite often, we were 3 girls in a group of 60 when I joined Morgan Stanley graduate analyst program in engineering. It was the February intake, and yeah, so that's kind of goes to show when I entered the industry what it was like.
And was that still the same when you went to New York in terms of 3 in 60, roughly the same?
I think that the opportunities for women to go abroad for education aren't that accessible, so it would be even lesser. But roughly, I think we had, I don't know on the top of my head what the numbers were like, but we had about, let's say 10 of us go. I remember being the only woman who went to for further studies from my engineering college in my batch.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I would have them in my network. I'm just thinking right now if I knew that. Yeah, there's probably 1 or 2 who joined more sort of information systems, which is also related in tech. But I'm talking specifically from my engineering college, which is one of the top ones in Mumbai as well. So it was one of the good ones that I went to. But yeah, it was quite small.
Yeah, big gap. Okay. So thank you for that. So Caterina, come to you next. Stay on the clockwise theme. So you said you started out, was it front end? Started out. Okay. So yeah, what was the reason that you got into tech? What drew you in?
Well, actually, that's a really funny story. I wasn't really drawn to tech. I was intimidated by tech and computers and all things related to anything digital. I was in university studying languages and rock music, and my last year I panicked and I realized I needed to do something sensible, and I switched my minor specialization in rock music to communication. And then I decided to supplement that with some work experience to try to help me get a job. So I applied for a job at the local radio station, that was advertising a job for a production assistant. And I naturally came to the conclusion that it was radio production, but it wasn't until I got to the interview that I realized it was web production. And I tried for the first 20 minutes to roll with it. And then at some point, about 20 minutes in, I stood up and I said, look, I'd really love this job, but apart from checking my email and using web crawler, which was the search engine before Google, if you can imagine, I'm not qualified for this. Thank you. I'm sorry. Goodbye. And the next day, they offered me the job anyway. And within my first week, I was coding my first HTML pages. I was learning about design concepts, usability concepts, and it was easily one of the moments, one of my luckiest moments in life, with the stroke of luck that changed my course. And I asked after a couple of weeks why they hired me and actually, by the way, this is something that I think about a lot every time I'm in the position to hire someone. I asked them why they chose me, considering I had literally no experience in the field. And what they said was they could see that I had experience abroad. So I had spent time living and studying abroad in Italy and in France, which they interpreted as someone who could easily adapt to something new. And I spoke several languages, which they assumed that a spoken language, which has its own grammar and syntax, even if a coded language isn't spoken, the same concepts apply, and I'd be able to pick it up really quickly. And that kind of forward thinking, it was forward thinking 20 plus years ago. It certainly would still be now, because we live in an era now where people tend to hire based on, keywords matches, in an automated way, which is really a shame. I was so lucky that someone looked beyond that. And that's why I have the career that I do today. So yes, I'm very grateful for that, but it was not me desperate for a career in technology. I didn't know I wanted it until I was in it.
That is a funny story. That's probably the first time I've ever heard a story like that of someone getting into tech, but it's definitely unique. So you've definitely got a good story to tell. Thanks for that. Elizabeth, I know that your journey into tech was obviously slightly different as well, but you're in a tech-driven business now. So do you want to just tell us about your journey into tech? What drew you in?
Yeah, so I was brought up in New Zealand, as you can probably tell from my accent. And I came to the UK and stayed with my sister, who was with her boyfriend, now husband. And he was working in tech, and he was an engineer, and it was just before Y2K. That's how old I am. So it's like just before the massive bug where everyone was terrified that everything was going to break. So it was very easy to get into tech, because it was where they were just desperate for people to test everything, to check everything, make sure that our systems were going to continue to work. I was new in the country. I needed a job. It paid well. I took it. It's that simple. And actually, when I took the job, there was two. There was one for a QA, and there was one for a building configuration analyst. And my brother-in-law said to me, he's like, do not take that building config job. He's like, the guy who's there, he's finding it incredibly hard. He's going to have a breakdown. He's like, don't take that job. Hopefully they don't offer it to you. Don't take it. And I'm like, That's one I already accepted. And actually it turned out incredibly well for me. Like it was perfect for me. It was very structured, very much how to automate things, get things working for everyone to use, customers and the business. So I was really pleased with it, but that's how I fell into it. The
Brilliant,
Y2K bug.
Yeah, Y2K, God, I remember that. It was 3 very different journeys there. Really, really interesting. So there's a lot to cover. Erin, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, so my question for you, so obviously it's kind of a big subject right now. How do we get girls into STEM or women in tech? So my question was, whose responsibility do you think it is? Does it rely on government policy? Is it education systems? Is it parents? Like, how do we get the conversations going? Because when I went to the biggest girls' school in my borough, and just as I was leaving, they managed to get train tracks so girls could start doing engineering, which was like a really big forward thing at the like, and that was only how many years ago? When did I leave school? Oh my goodness, 6 years ago. So it's like quite mental to think that we're where we are at the moment, and these sort of things are only just being introduced. So yeah, whose responsibility do you think it lies with? That could be anyone who would like to go first.
I think that's a question that I've deeply thought about in the last many years that I've been in this industry. I don't know who is responsible, but it is at the grassroots level where the change needs to happen within the intake at which you start deciding whether or not you want to join STEM in high school, maybe, I would say. So you're 12, 13 maybe, and then going into that is where I would say that's where it lies. And there could be lots of ways to encourage more women to join this and make it less scary and less like a boys' club. And that is where I think a lot of efforts are also moving towards that from what I'm seeing across the industry. But yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
I know you're saying that like 3-60 ratio, was that intimidating as well? Do you think that does put some people, especially like younger girls or things like that, people that are at school or college or thinking about getting into it, do you think that is one of the factors that puts people off?
Yeah, I think so. But I think that comes much later. I would say that after I already had an engineering degree, right? And still that's the case. But yes, seeing more role models as like women in tech would help at that front. And I think that's already changed. And that was 12 years ago, like that number. So I think it would look quite different now, I think, I hope. But it's still yeah, just making sure that it's more accessible, the knowledge of what a career would look like, what are the different opportunities. And these days, tech is a broad brush as well, right? You have product development, sort of more engineering focused roles, product design, product management, and all of those are form tech. So there's new segments in the industry that I think we can create more awareness of.
So you think if it was explained more like the sectors you could go into, like what you could do with tech, then you think there would be more of a movement for it?
I hope, yeah, I think so.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. Absolutely. I've been thinking back to when I ran a workshop, a day's workshop at a school outside of London when I was at Accenture, with the specific aim of trying to warm women, girls especially, to the idea of a career in technology. And it's true that a lot of them didn't actually know the roles that we have now, what the art of the possible was. And it's possible that in the average school teacher doesn't necessarily have exposure to be able to share these kinds of roles. I think also there was a lot of concern among girls to, there is this underlying idea. Some spoke more about it more directly, some less so, that it was a boys thing, or it wasn't appealing because there were, boys, and it wasn't engaging. And we had created some activities for them where they could create their own app. Some of the girls had, fashion design based apps that came out of the day, and a few others that would appeal to, the female teen more so. And that started to spark a light bulb. I just think there's still a lot of preconceived ideas of what a career in tech is and can be. And if they're making decisions about their path at the age of roughly 14, 15, it's almost too late at that point. It needs to probably start earlier, that they get to see what the art of the possible is. In terms of whose responsibility that is, however, I think that, the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It is everybody's responsibility. And when I mean everybody, I mean not just parents who they have contact with on a daily basis, or teachers, but we don't really see in the media as much female representation in roles in technology. Typically there's still the cliche of the boys with the glasses in the corner of the, it's a shame that it's like that. But if you watch TV and films, that's still what's being put forward. So it's until you see it, you don't know that it's a possibility. You don't know what it's really like, or that you might want to do it. And that's, I think, why I see it as a wider and broader problem. If it's not on your horizon, you can't even consider it.
Can I ask a question as a guest? Is that okay? Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Ali.
I'm Ali, 37, soon to be 40, part of this millennial generation. Just put a few comments. I was wondering, I was born in the UK, lived here all my life. I grew up in Blackheath, Dulwich, like South London. We're speaking a lot about this, and I understand. I do get it. But there's one point with career and success, and like with what I've put in the chat, it's very relative, isn't it? You go into work and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes, you're not going to gel with people at work. It's like you go to work and you have a good job, you have a good career. That might be in someone's mind that they're quote unquote successful. But then going on a deeper point with regards to work and employment, which is the root of this, and I get the thing about gender as well, I understand that. It all comes down to education. I think education is one of the most important factors in life. The second thing I want to ask, what does it mean to be successful? What is success? That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Open floor.
I don't think that's a question for women in technology. It's a gender neutral question, and anyone can define success by themselves. And I don't see that being very specific to what does success look like for women versus men. It's like very personal to me, I think, and it is personal to each individual, what success looks like.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just merely chiming in to agree with Mona.
I completely agree with what Monal was saying. And I think you can relate it back to the initial question. And the reason I can relate it back is because when Ali was talking about education, etc., I think that the education piece is really important in IT, because I think from an IT perspective, from a young age, it's considered to be quite a dry thing to do, when it's really not. Like, there's so much opportunity, and there's so much for design and understanding, and the ability to grow within what you're doing and to make real life changes, etc. And for me, that is a success, to show that what I'm doing is helping people, and also seeing an achievement is a success. And I think for a lot of people it is, but as Monal said, that's not gender specific. That's just how people work. But I do think that because IT has a historic, this is a dry thing to do, this is very cut, like you follow steps, etc. And I think that is a lot of what turns women off it as well, and girls off it, because it's not letting them express themselves as much as they would want to.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks, Erin. What I would want to know as well is, this ties in with what we've all been talking about for 2 years now, which is COVID. First it was Brexit and then it's COVID. But do you think that because of the way that the world has changed in terms of remote working, that we may see more women in technology now? Because, you know, women returning to work after having a baby, for example, they can work from home, they don't have to commute and then get childcare, these sorts of things. What do you think about that? Could that help? Caterina, I'll come to you for this one.
I think it can help in general with anyone who's looking for a different work-life balance. But if we go back to thinking about, you know, to get into tech, you need to start somewhere, and it typically tends to be at those earlier stages in life. I don't know how much that's helpful. I think at the beginning, when I was starting out as a developer, it made all the difference in the world to work within my team and pair programming and to share notes and to work on something together really helped. Now, yes, we can still do that in a digital way, but I think in terms of the balancing of childcare, balancing work-life balance, I don't know that that's going to drive more women unless it is someone who's never had time to do a coding course and is able to do it on the side as they're managing their remote job. That perhaps in that capacity.
Monal, what do you think about that?
I know of women who have had children and now prefer remote working. So I think that from just personally, anecdotally speaking, I know that it helps encourage more diverse workforce in general to join the technology industry.
Okay. Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
I think that people don't underestimate how much tech there is. So I think that working in tech is quite it's a very broad thing to say. So I work in engineering, which is tech, obviously, but I think everyone does. Like, I don't think there's any job where actually you're not doing anything in tech. I think working from home is an advantage if you do work purely in engineering and tech, then because you don't need to, you have like a lot of other options of contacting people, etc. But now, like even like teachers, they need to know a lot of tech because they're all like everything's online. You like every like nurses need to, and doctors, etc. Like so many people, everyone works in tech to a degree.
So Elizabeth, I'll start with you for the next question. We talked about the education system, the question that Erin asked, but once women are in tech and they're working, what are some of the challenges that women face in the workplace?
You have to be
and I know we can go on.
Yeah. So I started in finance in the 80s, or 90s, early 90s. So I had to have a very thick skin, but I don't know if that was being a woman or just generally working in that area. But I think actually it's an advantage being a woman working in tech, because the way that I found women think is quite, but because we can do more than one thing at once, it's very good because you get the ability to context switch. I think is much be easier for, it sounds really bad for women. I like that my team, who are mostly not women, are going to be like, what are you talking about? It's I think, but that's an example actually. So I manage, as I said earlier, like 3 teams. There's 8 people and only one of them is female. So that's a perfect example of the fact that we don't have a lot, and we actively recruit. Like we have actively tried to recruit for like females, etc. And it's just not the availability is quite low. So I think it is about getting people interested at an early age, and the way to do that, in my opinion, is to show them that it's an interesting role to be in. And I think that is the problem, because I found it interesting because I'm quite structured and not I know that I think differently to a lot of other women, and it's like at that age I did anyway. Whereas actually people who are more have more of a design kind of thought process, are more interested in creating, they're better engineers, and I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that also links back to Caterina's journey into tech as well, where didn't actively apply for that job, but then they saw something in her because of the multilingual aspect, because of the travel aspect. She could transfer those skills into learning a coding language. So it wasn't, okay, can you tick these boxes? Do you have all the right buzzwords in the CV? So it's tackling it at the root cause, which is really interesting. We need more experiences like Caterina's, I think, in the market. Monal, I'll come to you for the same question. What challenges do women face in the workplace?
I think that depending on which region you are in, because I have managed teams globally in at the most like 6 cities at a time, from what I remember, is very different. There's a cultural aspect to the challenges that women face that are very different in each sort of location. So I've had teams in India, in Canada, in North America, in EMEA, and there are different challenges. Like, for example, some of them could be language, for example, and even if you're really good at your technical skills, the more leadership positions that you aspire for, communication starts to become very vital, and that could be a problem. Though again, that is a gender neutral thing, but I do think that women don't put themselves forward as much as it comes naturally to men to do that, in my experience. And that is an area that across the board, if I had to generalize, can be, summarized. Like, it is universal. I think it's important. And I do think that, to Elizabeth's point, women do have qualities that actually can be quite effective leaders, like values of like empathy, or the qualities of bringing a group to consensus, having to listen to other viewpoints. I think women do that quite well. So there is an opportunity definitely for them to rise into those positions as well. But it's about firstly being vocal about what you need, what you want, what you like. Those are, I think, some challenges that I've also personally had to face, where I didn't think I could voice my opinion in a group of like 5 system architects, all men. And I'm the only one who has to push my opinion on how to build a system versus theirs. So it's confidence as well, and it's like the ability to be comfortable with failure. So a lot of your environment can also be conducive to that, which is where I think companies that are more inclusive, also will be more successful in the future, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you said confidence, because that was what I was going to ask you. Is it purely women don't put themselves forward as much as men because it's down to a confidence thing? And then also, is it embracing failure a lot of the time, especially when you talk about, DevOps, for example, fail fast, build fast, that type of mentality. So is it just purely down to like a confidence thing, you think?
I don't think it's just confidence, but it's a big factor, I think. Like, being comfortable with failure is about just having managers who can create that psychological safety for you to be able to try things out and be able to fail fast, right? And that is important. I mean, it's a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And Caterina, your last few, I know you're independent consultant now, but your last few years, you very much experienced from the corporate world, enterprise side, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, same question to you then. What challenges do women face in the workplace?
Well, it's a lot of what we've heard still applies, but I think there's a lot of unconscious bias. I think there's ways in which women are sometimes marginalized that are subtle and you don't think about it. It's, in a team that is predominantly of men, sometimes part of the socializing tends to exclude. I'm thinking actually, as I'm thinking out loud, I heard an example of, granted this was in an Asia office of one of our clients, where a young lady expressed that her frustration was very similar to this topic, that she had project ideas, but she was the only female on her team, and the gentleman would often go outside to smoke, sometimes cigarettes, sometimes cigars, and they would talk about the project when they were out, and then they'd come back with the decisions already having been made. And she felt very marginalized and excluded. And it was just in the sheer, for them, they probably didn't even realize, because they were just going out for a cigarette. And so it was unconscious, perhaps even to them. But when you make decisions around work among, activities that aren't necessarily in the office, that aren't inclusive, that's more common than you might think. In the consultancy world, sometimes it used to be, consultants taking their clients, typically men, out to certain kinds of events in the evening that would often exclude women or would make women feel uncomfortable. It's across, whether it's not just in corporate or not corporate. It's these things that really make an impact. Now, obviously, there are things that can be done to encourage women to go up the ranks, like having a male sponsor, perhaps, that can advance their career, who's more not just a mentor, but make space for them. I once heard a fantastic story from, it was actually during Barack Obama's presidency, and as great as he might be, he sometimes fell into this unconscious bias himself. And I remember the story was that the women would chime in with an idea, and it would sometimes just get dismissed, or a man would chime in with another idea, and that first idea would somehow just be forgotten in as quickly as it was said, because another idea was thrown in. And so through colluding with each other, what women decided to do was that every time a female suggested an idea, another female would chime in and say, I like the sound of that. Can you tell me more about it? Just to force them to create space to explore it. And then obviously when he discovered this, he was the one who would then go on talking about this technique. But it's really, there is a lot of talent, and there are a lot of really confident women who know their worth, but aren't really given the space. And this is why it's in these stories that we see, I think, a lot of the underlying problems that still persist.
That's really interesting. So that change actually came from within when you were talking about the Barack Obama story. That was really interesting. And that unconscious bias piece as well, where the men would go outside for a cigarette and come back and decisions would be made. That's something that's not really like something high level. That's when you get deeper into it. And I think that would obviously oftentimes go, unspoken. So those things actually need to be brought up, which is really good point. So thanks for that. So sticking along this theme then, and Caterina, I'll stay with you for this next one. What are some of the best and some of the worst, we'll play devil's advocate here, some of the best and worst workplace initiatives you've seen or heard of that help promote diversity?
Well, I think I take a page out of the book of my the first person who hired me. So I have loved when I see that people don't do a keyword matching search. They take someone that is from a different background or isn't necessarily a natural fit, but there's something about their profile that looks like they would add value in a way that you wouldn't expect. For example, a few years ago, we were hiring for someone on customer experience design, and the person had a degree in psychology, which, I mean, I can very easily see the connections, but someone else who wouldn't see a computer science background or a design background might just say that that's not a natural fit, whereas I can see the connections. And I think the best initiatives I've seen are the ones in which hiring managers are actually taught how to hire. Like, it's not just, the process of, who should interview when and what, but how to look at a person in a holistic way to understand the value that they can bring, regardless of their degrees or experience. Those are the times, and it's a learning curve, and everyone's still working their way to, you'll never reach perfection, but those initiatives and those efforts are the ones that I think have the most value.
Yeah. Elizabeth, come to you next. Same question. Just before you answer that, I know you said earlier that you've had a big hiring push on, D&I and diversity in the workplace. Do you, when you receive CVs, whether directly or Greenhouse or whatever, do you keep the names on or do you remove the names?
I keep the names on, but that's a really good point. I mean, I get it with the name, so the invite has the name on it anyway, so there's no like removal of it. That is a really good point, but I know personally that the way I look at CVs is there's certain styles of CV that I don't like, but I still look at it, but it's got nothing to do with like gender or like the way that someone, like where someone's from, etc. It's got nothing to do with any of that. It's just literally the way that it looks. Like I'll look at a CV and I'm like, I know where this has come from and I know the background of this person, even without reading that CV, based on the way it was set up. It has nothing to do with anything except for the type of company they came from. So yeah, I don't remove the name, but that is quite an interesting option.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because there's a few things, when you talk about job descriptions that are written by businesses in a masculine form or not a masculine form. So then I was thinking, well, that can sometimes maybe be translated to a CV. If you was to remove the name, that would remove any kind of bias or unconscious bias towards applications. But yeah, I know there's tons of initiatives out there. That was just one. But yeah, same question to Caterina. So what are some of the best and worst initiatives you've seen in the workplace to promote diversity?
I think that's for me.
Yeah.
I think that my take on this is a little bit more geared towards like a lot of nonprofits I've seen in the industry that are beyond just the workplace. We've had someone in Trey join from Code First Girls, which is a boot camp where you can learn to code for free. And she's a great engineer as well. And I think that those kind of initiatives help as well. Those are, I think, some of the best, in my opinion. I've been a mentor for shecodes.io, which teaches, and I think it's called She++ Codes. It used to be when I would mentor them. I think they help, and reinforce why it also gives me joy to do it, but it reinforces the need for like having, training set up because it's a increasingly technological job market and women need to keep up just as everyone else. So having those communities where we can have women learn how to code or learn about careers in tech are like really good initiatives that I've been part of. I was just going through one before joining this webinar, and it was there was a metric that says women make up 50% of the UK workforce, but only less than 15% of them are in STEM jobs. And it's through those kind of initiatives that I've learned about the gap really as well. So I think they're very good, and I like volunteering for them. And there's also initiatives like We Are Tech Women that recognize and sponsor, award women who are doing well, and they have something called Rising Stars Awards, which is also very good to encourage people who are entering the industry to continue staying on the leadership path. I think it's recognition as well. Those are good initiatives in my view.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So I'm conscious of the time. I mean, I've got about another 20 questions to be able to ask, but I am conscious of the time. So before I ask just one final question to our guests, Erin and Paula, did you have any final questions that you'd like to ask the group?
Well, I was just going to say about, just in terms of what you think we can do as recruiters to attract more females within, to roles. So obviously we can't be, we need to keep things quite open when we're, we can't just submit women to roles. So it's just, if there's anything you think that we can do within our adverts or within, the way we're sort of promoting roles. And yeah, any thoughts on that?
I feel like I'm a little bit repetitive, but I guess for me, the real secret lies in looking beyond the job spec, looking beyond the CV, and looking at people holistically, and then figuring out what that need is for that business and being able to connect the dots. I, you know, my first technical director role, it was a role in which I had people management, line management responsibilities, more client engagement, and it was my first role that wasn't just that of a pure developer. And the recruiter who called me to hire me for it, I didn't apply for the role. I see a recurring thread, actually. He contacted me and I wasn't interested. I said, look, I'm happy being a developer. I don't really have any experience. I haven't done it before. I'm not really sure that I can do it. I like what I'm doing now. And it was the recruiter who could see things that I couldn't see yet, and encouraged me that just because I hadn't done it before doesn't mean I wouldn't be good at it, that other experience I had would translate into being strong in that role, that I, fit the organization well. There were things he could see because I didn't know the organization that well. I interviewed, I applied, and I got the job. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't encounter a recruiter who saw beyond my experience and saw beyond, what was in black and white and connected dots in a way that, I certainly wouldn't have either. So I think if it's, we talked about, Monal mentioned the importance of empathy before, and I can't stress its importance enough. If every conversation you have is a conversation that you have with someone who might be your cousin or your sister, or that you want them, you are inherently invested in their success, and that you see them in that way, then it goes beyond whether or not it's a perfect match. You can see a future path for them. You can see something that they don't see and help them along the way. I know maybe that's not the pure job description of a recruiter, but I've had recruiters in my life who have been, my fairy godmothers and godfathers. So.
No, that's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to add on there. I think that's excellent, like exactly what you were saying. There's anecdotal evidence, like I'm sure that there is real factual evidence, but I don't have the numbers, where women will apply for roles if they've got 90% of what's being asked for, and men will apply with 40. Now, recently I saw a job advert which I thought was really good, because at the end, or like at the beginning, it said, you may not have everything we're asking for, but if it looks like something you're interested in, just apply. Like, all we can do is say no. And I think like having that sort of called out is really important, especially for women, because I would be more inclined to apply for something. Well, not, I'm happy where I am, but if I was looking, I'd be more inclined to apply for something if it had that kind of information on it, because I am exactly like that. I will not apply for a job if I don't think I can do 90% of the things they're asking for. So I think that that's accurate.
No, that's a really interesting point, and I'm sure we'll all be bearing that in mind. Thank you for your thoughts.
Monal, anything to add on to that?
I think that when recruiters have a personal touch in the emails that they reach out to me, that shows that they have done, they've looked at my profile and thought there's something of interest. The recruiter at Trey, Peter, asked me on an email, which was, I think, second or the third time he was reaching out, and he asked, how's your Sunday going? And it was on a Sunday, and it really caught my attention. I was like, oh, these days recruiters don't ask about how my Sunday is going. Who is this person? It just made me have a look at the company, and also Trey really puts their flexibility and all the things that we spoke about earlier that actually encourage women to join front and center of everything that they do, whether it's on their website or the way their recruiting managers speak and things like that. So I think that helps as well when you reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So my final question, open floor again, a nice way to end today's podcast actually would be, what would your advice be, or what advice would you give to women who are thinking about moving into the tech space?
do it. That is
Do
my
it.
advice. Do it.
Simply do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's no point thinking about it. Just give it a go.
I would add that it's a lot of fun and incredibly rewarding. It's really satisfying. It's really enjoyable, and I get a high off of it. I remember going to sleep some nights thinking about some coding issues and waking up with the solution. It was just the biggest thrill. And if you haven't done it, then maybe it's hard to understand, but I can assure you once you're in it, it's just such an adrenaline rush. It is a lot of fun to build something, and then to build something, and depending if it's a website or an app, to know that people around the world can see your work. That's quite a thrill.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Caterina and Elizabeth. That's my experience too. Just do it. And it's a ride and it's a journey. It's like an adventure that you will go on if you decide to build a career in tech. Yeah.
Brilliant. What a lovely way to end it. Well, Monal, Caterina, Elizabeth, Paula and Erin, thanks very much. And thank you everybody for listening. The podcast will be posted in the usual places. So Spotify and on the Interquest website, of course. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you guys. Nice to meet you all.